Welcome to Live Sensate. I'm Sheila Applegate.
And I'm Zac Hansen.
In this podcast, we dive deep into the concepts of consciousness and other interesting trivia in the Netflix original series, Sense8. We're doing an episode-by-episode exploration of how we can live a sensate life. We'll be also throwing in some special episodes along the way. In this segment, What's Going On?, we talk about what's happening in the world of Sensate fandom. Let's begin with a guided meditation. On March 20th, we are doing a Give Sense8 a Season 3 global meditation. We're having everyone tune in from around the world and give this world a great big Sense8 vibrational hug with the intention that we get more seasons of this incredible transformational show, and that the world begins to resonate from this incredible frequency. So you can sign up to join me live as I lead you through a meditation, and there is a recording for those of you who are in places in the world where you may be asleep, and join us in dreams and come later. All right. You may have also seen that Netflix Life on Twitter has started a countdown where they are starting to put out some Sense8 articles and kind of get some little bit of hype going for this special. We haven't heard the announcement of when yet, but it is around the corner. Don't forget to put your submissions in to share with a documentary that Martin Earhart is making, Sense8 is My Life. Those submissions need to be in by March 31st, and the information to send them is on our Patreon. So get out your cameras and tell your story. Type it up if you don't want to be on camera, but be a part of this revolution. And have you seen that we have some Live Sensate t-shirts out now? We've got one that says Sensate AF, because you are, and another one that says Got Limbic Resonance, because you do. Okay, they only say the first line. I'm just added the extra. And some exciting news. Maximilian Ewalt, who played Grace, Neat's mom, has officially scheduled to record with us, so she will be on a show of Live Sensate coming up, and she's amazing in real life. We've had a chance to get to know her a little bit. It's going to be an incredible show. And finally, but most importantly, thank you to Stephanie P. and Martin Earhart for supporting us on Patreon. Let's get this show started.
In today's episode of the Live Sense8 podcast, we'll be covering episode 4 of season 1, What's Going On? And it was directed by Tom Twyker, and it was written and created by the Unpronounceable Productions, Lana and Lily Wachowski, and Michael J. Straczynski. And we got a little bit of a synopsis here. We got Max and Felix with the diamond buyers, selling and celebrating. What do you think about this, Sheila?
I like selling and celebrating.
Yeah, selling stuff's good. It's fun. It's exciting. You get to buy some new shoes. Get to be a new man or woman. And we got Kala meeting up with some dirty bastards about her wedding and learning about the dark side of her soon-to-be bonded husband.
Right. In 2 different scenes. She learns about that at the temple, but she's getting down to see some of the layers of what's going on.
So many layers in this show.
Yeah.
It's like an onion, and it's delicious. All right, so then we have Capheus. Totally got picked up by a serious gangster drug lord. It was scary.
It was scary.
Did you get scared? I got scared. I was scared for Capheus. I didn't think Van Damme was coming back.
Van Damme always comes back.
I saw the show once and I already knew, but I was like, man, they did a good job. I really don't think Van Damme's coming back. All right, and then we got Leto, totally upset about Danielle's ex showing up at his sacred space, which is the stage.
But was supposed to be the home. So we're looking at some of the new dynamics of what it's like to bring a third person into a relationship and balancing out some of the old dynamics. So that's getting interesting.
Who's totally involved with the mafia. It's not,
Oh, that
somebody,
person. Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, Danielle is totally involved with the mafia.
like her parents, her new crazy husband who's loco. All right, and then we got Will speaks to Jonas and also helps Sun and Nomi at the same time. Will's getting prepped. He's getting groomed to be like the quarterback of the group, in my opinion. And then we have Sun. She confronts her asshole motherfucking father and brother, they're dickheads, about the pharmaceutical embezzling as they try to manipulate her and taking the fall so she can save the company.
Yeah, my notes of that part was pretty much like, these guys are pissing me off. They're manipulating. These guys, like, mostly my notes were just like talking about her brother and her father and how much that bothered me. But we'll talk about that as we go further.
And then we have the What's Going On music karaoke scene, which was awesome.
It was very awesome.
Very thematic.
Perfect soundtrack for a lobotomy.
It is the perfect soundtrack for a lobotomy.
All right, so should we start by... It actually opens pretty intensely with Felix and Wolfgang.
Before we get started, what do I normally say at the beginning of these shows that you would like to say today, Sheila? I wasn't going to let that one slide.
Okay, so I watched it earlier in the week to prepare. I usually go ahead and watch it, and then we watch it together. And of course, I've watched it a few times. But I did get done with this one, and I went to Zac, and I'm like, there's nothing in this episode.
And I was like, oh, man, this is going to be a rough ride trying to record this one. Because that's usually what I say. Boy, were we wrong.
Right. When we sat down together, there was a lot.
Yeah, we're chilling out right now. We're like, how do we get this thing under 4 hours? I'm just kidding. Don't worry. It won't be that long. But seriously, it could be.
Okay, so back to Felix and Wolfgang, because this is the piece I picked up on, and maybe even what made me not see anything else, because when I watched it that one time, because this to me is so huge. Like, I thought we could take a whole episode on Felix and Wolfgang's first opening lines.
Mm-hmm.
So we're pretty much going to do that right now.
Let's do it. I'm actually going
to... before you quote, let me tell everyone, I want to tell everyone where they are.
Oh, yeah.
So in the opening scene, and there's references to this, but you may not know all of what they are. Like, I knew it had to do with the Holocaust, but after research, what I realized is that it's actually it's called the Garden of Exile, and it stands outside the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And the garden represents the experience of the European Jewish exiles driven from their home during World War II. And apparently when you're standing in between the rows of 49 concrete container columns, there's a feeling of being very claustrophobic and disoriented. And you have this sense that you know you logically can escape, or that escape is very close. But physically, you feel as if you're trapped forever. And apparently, it was created by Danielle Libeskind, or designed. That's Daniel. I'm sorry, Daniel, and he designed the museum as well. And So the garden's columns are arranged in square on a 12-degree gradient, effectively disorienting and destabilizing you as you walk up and down the rows. And only when you look up and see the willow branches reaching towards the sky and dipping over the edges of the containers do you feel that there's possibly some release. So it's actually designed to give you the feeling that the people who were trapped in the Holocaust would have experienced.
That's intense.
Yeah. And another interesting fact about this is that apparently it opened on September 11th, 2001, and closed shortly after because of the September 11 attacks at the Twin Towers. So on its very first day of opening is the 9/11 attacks in New York, and then they closed down for a few days because of that, and then they reopened for their first time. But coincidence?
Pretty synchronistic.
Synchronicity, yes. All right, so I don't know, I think that in itself. So this is the point that they choose to meet, and now we open up to the Garden of Exile, and Felix.
And Felix. Everyone wants to believe that they'll be a hero. Join the resistance. Try to kill Hitler. It's such fucking bullshit. It's obedience, not resistance. That's the glue of every country, every army, every religion in the world. And then Wolfgang, what the fuck are you talking about? Felix, I'm talking about us. I'm talking about our revolution. I'm sorry, evolution.
Evolution, our evolution. So we've got Felix, who's basically the sidekick, comic relief.
Yeah, and they got a serious bromance going on too.
Yeah, and then he comes out with this like mind-blowing explanation of humanity.
Mm-hmm. You can tell he's a deep thinker. Both of them are actually they're very, they grew up and they're gangsters. It's what they do, but it doesn't mean that's what they want to be doing, or they don't see something different in reality. So very deep these characters are.
Yeah, and so then the diamond buyer had chosen the spot, and he says that this place brings me clarity to any decision. And he thinks about how much courage his mother had, because he tells the story about how she fell in love with an Englishman and left Germany against her parents' will, and ended up escaping the situation. And when she came back, she was never able to find her family, but she did stay there, never left again, which is an interesting story. And he thinks about how much courage she had to make that decision. And then he throws another really powerful line in.
He does. Our existence depends on sheer impossibilities. And if you look into quantum physics and quantum superpositioning and that explanation of life, I'll let you do that on your own. It's pretty amazing to see how we really are being supported by nature, if that's what you want to call it, on the best outcome that we could possibly experience as this being. So it's really cool that they put that in there for sure.
Yeah, so I kind of dove into this one, and it really kind of, I don't want to say trigger in the way that people think of trigger being a negative thing, but it kind of invoked in me a thought that I've contemplated for a long time, and kind of stems off into a lot of places that we can discuss. But I think that history is so important. And my understanding, as a U.S. citizen, I'm born and raised here in the U.S., and I know we never know everything, and we're always told stories. And so I'm not even saying that this perception is more real than another perception, but we were taught so much about Hitler and the Holocaust and never let it happen again. And that was a huge part of our curriculum in the schools. But like the United States is the hero in that, right? Like they just apparently in the stories, or in the stories we were taught, come in and help save the day, but Hitler's the bad guy and the Nazis, and I'm not saying that I'm advocating for that at all, but what I'm saying is this black and white thinking and the others, the other people that we must not be like, and kind of what we talked about a couple weeks ago or last week about not looking at organizations as a they. But what we've done during that time is completely shielded people from the United States history and the reality that happened here. Like, we're not really taught that. I grew up on the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois nation, which is actually the Native Americans, as we call them now. They were here on this land before the Pilgrims arrived, the Europeans, and they already had a system of democracy, and our entire government is based on their system that was ancient and here and working.
Minus a very important part.
Right, minus an important part in that they took out the feminine side. So in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the clan mother plays an integral role, and creates that balance of the male and the female, which we did not include. We kind of stripped that role out, we being the forefathers.
So to paint a little bit of better picture here, so we have the chiefs. They were there. They let the chiefs be chiefs, but when it came to any major decisions, the clan mothers would actually be the ones to decide if the chiefs could do what they decided to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're the ones. Well, they're consulted and revered in that way too. So the feminine energy being a part of it, but also they are the ones that can choose the chiefs and remove the chiefs. And that's only a tiny aspect. Then we have so what I'm saying is I grew up on this land, so we actually had in the middle school we did have one social studies segment where we learned about that. But for the most part, I'm surprised at what people don't know. But it's not even that. Most of the history, most educated Americans that were just go through the school system are not, on purpose, I believe, they're not taught about the fact, we have this love story of them finding this new land. It wasn't new. It was completely inhabited and conquered. And there's a genocide at the roots of this government and this country that nobody wants to talk about. So we tell this story of these foreigners who did this and hide the own story. And that's my perception of it. My understanding, and this is where I come to this, I've heard, and I believe it to be true, that the Germans dealt with the Holocaust completely differently. And in doing that, grew and overcame and moved from this devastation to becoming also world leaders. And which we didn't think, which maybe people wouldn't have thought would happen, but they brought this reality. And not that I'm saying, I think all history gets written in a monoistic way, in the sense that it doesn't show all the layers of truth.
The victors write the history books.
This is true, right? So I'm not saying that it's perfect, but we've got this garden, this monument that's not just statues of the army and the warriors. It's a it's a calculated art that allows you not to think about what happened, but to feel it, not to have sympathy for these poor foreigners, these theys, and to separate yourself from them. And not even foreigners meaning another country. I mean, I'm glad it's not me. Like, it's them. Like, there's poor people. It would never happen to me. Like Felix is saying, I'd be the hero. I'd be doing this. I would do this in this situation. But instead, it gives you, this garden gives you this opportunity to experience the feeling. They replicate the emotion of it. So right there, they're bringing in emotion instead of just story. And so then people can, to me, emotions are more of a story than the words, than the thoughts, than the way it gets told. So if you experience the feeling of it, it means more than the details, which, like you said, change with who's telling it.
Mm-hmm.
But we integrate it when we feel it. So that's why I didn't see anything else in this episode first time, because I've been thinking about this for a long time.
And if Sheila didn't do some research on this particular scene, like we watched it again together, and I was like, I would have no idea where they were at. That would make it was a little Easter egg. It's like, I'm glad you went and researched where they were at so we could have this conversation, and just to show like the idea of how different countries handle different things. Like, instead of sympathy, we have an empathetic limbic resonance, right? We have this connection that you can experience, and life is really about our experience, and that's where we get our most of our trustworthy information comes from our own experience and empathy building with other people around us, which is a total theme of the show. So just this little nonchalant scene, right? It's really potent.
Yeah, and then just to bring it into sort of like how, because this is all about how does it relate to our everyday life. And I was watching The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and he brought on the three Americans in the 1517 Paris. So it's a movie that's coming out, and it has to do with, and they're the people that were actually on the train. So
in Paris, there was some tourists from America over there, and there was a gentleman who was going to do this. He was going to shoot down some people in public on a train, right?
A lot of people.
Right.
A lot of ammunition.
This terrorist comes in. He's got a razor blade. He's got an AK, and he's got a pistol. And he's just going to start shooting people down. And then you have these three Americans that are on this train. And that's what the movie's about, because they stopped him from killing anybody.
Right. So that isn't about... So you've got these heroes, right? That's one of those things where it would say, like Felix is saying, well, everybody, thinks they're going to be a hero. So we got these three people who are a hero in our eyes. And so they get on to Trevor Noah's show, and he's asking them what they were thinking and what they were feeling. And it's such a split-second thing. The first guy who charged at him in the beginning, he basically said his thought was, we're all dying anyway. I might as well go out with a blaze or something like that. So if I'm going to die, I might as well let people, hear some good things about me.
Trying, right, exactly.
Yeah. And then his friend says, well, we've been friends, since we were 5. Our moms still live next to each other. I just would have felt like crap if I lived and he died. So I went in too. So it's just this sort of like, you don't make the decision to be a hero. Like, none of them, although they saved the entire train of people, and then one of them, or then they go over and somebody did get shot and they saved that person's life, but they're like, well, we just were thinking he was going to die and we wanted to be with him at the end and make his last few minutes okay, and yet they saved their life. So it's just like, wow, when we just stay in the moment and we're real. Because if they could look at that and be saying that now, what the difference is they weren't looking at a storyline. They were being themselves, and they were looking at the moment step by step. They were just doing what their brain told them to do for themselves in that moment. And in doing that, they became the heroes.
Yeah, it was a pretty good outcome for them.
Yeah, it worked out well. Yeah, actually, the guy that charges him actually got the gunman shot at him, but the ammunition didn't work,
Yeah,
and
malfunctioned.
that's why he survived. So
Weird.
yeah,
Like that one bullet didn't go off
and it changed
properly,
everything.
right?
Yeah.
So if he didn't charge then, and he got that unjammed, that second bullet probably would have worked, right? So just that, I mean, this kind of goes into trust too. Like, who do you trust? And they just worked on instinct. And anyway, he didn't hesitate to move because they were in a situation where it didn't. But the idea here is, you know, we as people, I think life is very mundane in general for most people. So we like to romanticize everything to make it better than it is, right? So these guys are just like dealing with this event that happened in their life, and they have these very simple thoughts about it, but we'll see what they do with the movie. And everybody reveres them as a hero, and they're just like, you know, I just did what I had to do. It wasn't a big deal. I was just being in the moment. And that's how we write our stories too, about history, and how we have heroes, and how we romanticize every type of culture and everything. Like, I just think it's something that we naturally do as human beings, just to make things a little more interesting here on planet Earth.
Yeah, and the line really with Felix in this discussion really is about the dichotomy, because the only story we really tell, even in our entertainment, is the hero's journey. Like, that is the human story that we know. We really don't know beyond this, and I know we've talked about that before. So we're trying to be the heroes, but really that dichotomy of, at the same time, countries don't want heroes. They want obedient people. Religions want obedient people. And I'd say the institution of that, to keep an institution
Not
running.
the individual, right?
Not the individual, but the institution are run, or the cogs in that are the obedient. Like, they wouldn't exist without the obedient energy that he talks about.
Yeah, this line for me is very important, because I think, to me, once you start becoming very mindful of your own self, and you understand your belief systems and where your thoughts come from, and the stories and all of these kind of things, you start to understand how they become puppet strings, right? We paint borders, us versus them, to motivate people into an archetype as the hero to do things they normally wouldn't do. Because if they were mindful, they would see through the bullshit and they wouldn't do those things, right? So when we practice being consciously awesome, if you will, like choosing to overwrite our subconscious patterning and work through those things, you just, for me, it's a huge trigger, because you have people that get up on stage and they say speeches, and they're really good marketers, like Hitler, for example, right? His country was actually having really hard economic times, and he needed to do something because they were put in this place. And they did something. I'm not saying it's right, but he had to do something for his people not to survive. You don't hear that part of the story, right? You just hear him as this big bad boogeyman who did bad things. Why did he do those bad things? He had an environment that produced that for him, right? So it's all about our environment. There's a lot of things that happen in life when people don't have anything to lose. It's okay to lose it all. So they do really bad things because they don't have anything anyway. So,
or they do really good things.
Fair enough.
Because that's what those people on the train did. They figured, we don't have anything to lose, so let's do this. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it happens either way.
So it's just the divisiveness of identifying with a certain thing, right? Whether that's a gender or a skin color or an idea or anything. It's manipulation at its finest, because we can't disassociate with that just being that and us being us. And it's not, there's a story behind the belief that motivates us to behave, because all beliefs dictate behaviors. So it's very important to understand where your beliefs come from so you're not being manipulated on a subconscious level. That's why I'm saying this is important to me, because they see through the bullshit.
So then what Felix says is, I'm talking about us. I'm talking about our evolution. That line is equally as important, because to me, that's saying waking up, changing the system, realizing who we are, being honest with ourselves. That is evolution. Evolution comes, he is evolution in that moment because he's noticing and he's saying it. And in doing that, he's changing it. So as individuals, the only way out of this is as individuals wake up and change that perception, in my idea, in my thoughts.
Sure. And then they move on to buying new shoes and how it makes them feel like a different person, right? Those old shoes don't fit. Now it's time to be the new me.
Right.
Right. So he is very much talking about evolution.
Right. But I also want to note in this, the diamond guy, the guy that buys the diamond, I just can't spend my time memorizing the names of all the side people. There's so many people in this show. So the diamond guy, another thing that he says is, without the past, there would be nothing to think about, let alone someone to think about it. So if the past dictates what we think, then revisiting the past can change our future. Mm-hmm. So now, if we look back at the stories of history that have been told with new shoes on, with new eyes, in an evolved way, we actually can change the future by looking at the past.
Right, because we can make different choices.
Right.
Right, we can.
But
see
not
through
looking
all
at
that
the past as it's been propaganded to us, but looking at it with our own eyes. Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
Well, and he also goes on to talk about courage. And to me, this is one of the highest qualities I think we can develop as a human being. And episode 2, I am also a we, really talked about that. Like, there was, who do you trust? And whenever you don't have that courage to make the decisions that you know are best for you, it's usually the ones you regret. Even though having courage doesn't mean that you don't have fear and that you're not able to move and act accordingly, right? So like the guys on the train, they had courage to do what they did. They chose courage versus fear, right? So developing that courage allows us to make conscious decisions and choose consciously based on the information that we have to build different choices or a new future or a better us or whatever that may be. So to me, I think courage is a theme that's in the show. And I think that was a very important thing that he said.
Let's move on to Sun and that story, another one that got me going a little bit. So, last week we talked about Sun's mother, and on her deathbed, basically telling Sun to look out for her brother. And I kind of gave the mother the benefit of the doubt a little bit, like, well, we don't know what else was around that. Should we go a little deeper into that in this week? And so the line, as they extend it, so they take that same line from last week, but they give us both sides of what, and go deeper into what that conversation was. And Sun's mother says to her, as a little girl, she says, "So proud of you, so smart and so strong. You cannot be jealous of your brother. If I cannot be there to help father realize his dreams, you must be there for me. Please, son, take care of your brother. Do this for me." And that is, I mean, I know that's human nature. A mom's dying. She sees her son as the weaker one. She understands how overpowering the father can be. She puts this on this little girl, and it dictates her life. And this is why it's so important that you continue your relationship with people once they die. Like, we have to, I think one of the ways that we're going to evolve past these repetitive cycles time and time again as humans is to open that veil and allow ourselves to move consciousness beyond the physical. And this is just such a good example. But even if you're like, okay, I like this show, I like Sensates, Sheila and Zac are okay, but they're crazy talking about, being able to communicate with someone after they die. I personally think it's crazy to think you can't, but we all have our own sides. So let's say that you think that and you think, oh, yeah, this is fine, but that's just crazy. So at least don't hold the person to their physical limitations, because when we do that, we hold ourselves to the past. So Sun is not giving her mom the honor of her soul. Sun can only see and navigate from basically her mom's weakest point. And her humanness, her fears got pushed on to Sun and dictated her life.
Well, I mean, just check out this line, and there's a little bit of a redundancy here between what's going on with Sun, but her mom, right? So this little girl, her mom's dying. She's going to want to do everything she possibly can for her mom because she loves her so much, and she wants to make her mom proud, right? But her mom sits here and compliments her, and then attaches a ball and chain to her ankle for the rest of her life, all in the same moment, right? What kind of manipulation is that? And of course, as people, because if we're not conscious of ourselves and our mind and our place in the world, we're constantly looking to others to reinforce that we're valid, that we are enough. And this is where Sense8 saved my life. Lincoln was talking about this, like you are enough as the person that you are. You don't need your parents' praise. You don't need your spouse's praise. You don't need it makes things easier, but you don't need them to be the greatest person that you are. In fact, I would argue that it's going to make you a lesser person if you need those things. So as a kid, she's sitting there and her mom just compliments her, and it's manipulation at its finest again, but she's doing it to a little kid. Not even that she was doing it on purpose.
And then it's almost the identical manipulation that her father does years later.
Right, that's what I was...
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that, because this is who's the good person, who's the bad person. So she's holding her mom as her savior, as the one to be revered, as the one who loved her and is beautiful. Like we get this sort of angelic energy to her mom, yet she's saying these things, right? Mm-hmm. And then we've got this sort of asshole energy towards the dad, and he does the exact same thing when he's talking about her going to jail. The father is so calculated, and this is his line. It's almost the same, because it's the first compliment that Sun gets from her father is what we perceive, and it's twisted with and you're so wonderful, you're going to go to jail for your brother. But he says, my wife, God bless her beautiful soul. So there you go, right there. My wife, God bless her beautiful soul, tugging at the heart center, because he knows that that's the one thing that you can manipulate Sun with, is the memory of her mother. So my wife, God bless her beautiful soul, raised one child capable of seeing her way out of this disaster. And he empowers her. It's he's saying you are the better person, even though he spent her whole life making her less than, treating her as less than, and find her way out of it, right? Yeah. Because it's not hers to get out of. She doesn't need to. They need her. And he does it's almost an equal line, even though we look at the mom and we're like all compassionate for her and we're pissed off at the dad. Humans are humans. Mm-hmm. I think and emotions are emotions, and it doesn't really make either of them bad people. They're just making bad decisions.
Yeah. So we watched this scene, I did a couple times with Sheila, and I had a couple different interpretations of what was happening in the scene where Sun's dad and brother in the same room. the last time I watched it, I was like, I had a hunch. I was like, man, maybe they set her up for this because it was just too good. Maybe like the father and the son, because he knew what was going on. He knew, but just not maybe to what extent. But clearly, you saw how he was spending the money. It's not like his dad was stupid. He might be ignoring what he was doing.
Oh,
but
he totally says he knew what he said. You can't get anything by my country. He knew that.
Right. So I just think they were setting her up for that, actually. The more I, like, the last resonance of that scene that I was stuck with is like, oh, she just totally, they knew what they were doing consciously. You know, they were just going to let her take the fall.
Yeah. And then her brother basically says, he says to his dad, you taught me how to break the rules. And then the father says, to bend them, not break them. So this is exactly what he was taught to do. Mm-hmm. He just took it further. He didn't know the line that Dad had been sitting on. You know, he crossed it a little bit. Or maybe it just was after years of getting, you know, maybe it wasn't even him. Maybe it's just because after years of embezzling, you're more likely to get caught.
Right.
So yeah, it's something that had been going on. It wasn't the fact that he did that. It was the fact that he got caught. Mm-hmm. That was an issue for him.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how long he planned to put Son under the bus, but it definitely wasn't a new idea for him.
Right.
Which is irritating.
Sure.
Irritating to me. We do have to note that I didn't pick up on it the first couple times I watched it, but the embezzlement was around a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
So we've now got the pharmaceutical company going, and we've got that in Dubai, and we've got that with Capias, and now we've got this with...
Yeah, so there's a couple different angles. So it was stocks. So her company does stocks or something. Like, we don't really know what they do, but she said, like, the stocks get siphoned, basically. And so it's pharmaceutical stocks versus the actual pharmaceuticals themselves. So we have two different conspiracies or two different things at play. Just to...
Yeah, I mean, there's something there with that it's moving through all of them and connecting them. All right. Do we want to talk about Capias?
Zebra. Sure, let's talk about Capias. What's going on in his world?
Well, I think this is a really important contradiction to move right from Son to this. So we talk about how Son's mom and dad have treated her, and brother. Brother is pissing me off too, because he, you know, is so manipulative, begging her like a little boy to help. I'm back to Son for a second. I'm not done venting.
You're not done. I'm
and
not
then
done
later
with you.
he sends her a text. Can we talk like we used to? I love you.
If I knew I was going to jail, I would have kicked him out of the window.
She does punch that out a little bit. So, but anyway, we just talked about what her mom did to her, which is an act of love. I'm not saying her mom didn't say those things out of love. Everything really is love, but it's how do you want love to be expressed, and how do we learn to express love without manipulation, and to claim ourselves, and to respect the other person. And Capias's mom on the other side of this is also dying, right? But she's not saying, oh, Capias, take care of me. Oh, Capias, you know, do this for eternity because of your dying mom. Instead, she says, if I was not such a bad person, I would stop taking my medicine and let you get on with your life. So she's actually taking responsibility for herself, and she's actually honoring him for the choices that he's making. And actually, I mean, not that she had to say she's a bad person, but she's acknowledging that it's her weakness that's wanting her to stay alive. I'm not saying she shouldn't stay alive and that he doesn't want her to stay alive, but she's honoring the bigger picture. She's got she's taking responsibility for the the feelings of that she's going through as she reaches her death.
Yeah, big contrast.
We should all be like Capheus and his mom.
Born with a sunny disposition.
And then, then the line that Capheus says, and we forgot to go back and look up that one word, because Zac and I heard different things, but Capheus then replies to her and he says, "When I iron my shirt, it always burns up. Without you, I would go into the world naked." Is how I heard it. Zac heard it.
I heard it. I would go into the wilderness naked.
So either way, it's really quite, well, it has different meanings depending on which one of us, that one word would change it. So we can talk about both words, however we hear it, right? So if we go into the world naked, he's just honoring her again, the vulnerability, the love that she's given him. I mean, he's just honoring how much she does for him. He's joking about it with the iron, but obviously it's more than physical clothes that he's talking about.
Right, and I thought of it as he's always wants to be a zebra and go out into the wilderness. So I saw that as, you're my reason to be doing what I'm doing and living the life I am. And if we go back to a scene earlier, his mom kind of programmed him to think that way, because she's like, hey, if we're together, something good's always going to happen, right? So there's this bond that they created through all their hardship when he was a child, with giving away a sibling and not eating and going from tribe to tribe, all this kind of stuff. So to me, and it's your mom, like mom's got a special spot for everybody. So there was a kind of a codependency there that I saw too. Like if he's just going to give up and go into the wilderness and chew on some grass and eventually get eaten by a lion, then, it's kind of like he's going to give up.
But at the same time, I can see that on the other side of it, like with my career, and all the work that I put into my service, my career, and all of this. And even after my twin flame died, I don't know if I would have given up without my kids. Like, they are the reason that I stayed grounded enough to keep going. And I think that reality is true for us, that often having somebody to make the human experience worth doing is important.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't saying it's good or bad. I was just
Right.
making an observation.
Yeah, I get either one of those. So, and then he turns from that conversation and says, "I have a feeling today is going to be a really good day." No matter what happens, he sees it and he finds the good. And in doing that, good happens, even though there's crap happening all around him.
Yeah, somebody's got to be the optimist of the cluster, right? Somebody's got to have a sunny disposition. I don't think all the characters... That's what makes Capheus. He's very happy-go-lucky, very positive person.
So then Capheus in his "this is going to be a good day," and it actually, as the story unfolds, is a good day. We don't know that in the beginning, but good things and bad things happen from every decision we make. So as he moves on, we said Capheus gets picked up by Silas, who's the drug lord, and as they're driving away, this part is important, I think. So the guy from the bus says, "It seems he is not coming back." So I guess it's not when they're driving away. Like the military people or whatever he's got, they're in uniforms. They stop him and they take him off into the jungle, in the woods or trees.
With some assault rifles.
Yeah. And so the guy says, it seems he's not coming back. And Jealous says, "Van Damme always comes back." And I just think the love and the... Jealous sees Capheus for who he really is. He says it in that other line. They're just one-liners. If anyone can be a zebra, it's you. So isn't that what we all want? To be seen, to be understood, to have even one person who actually sees the specialness inside of us and doesn't see us like everyone else, but sees something that we are, that spark, is like the most incredible thing.
It is a beautiful gift to have that as a human being, no doubt.
It's always what I've always wanted. I mean, I think if anything, that's been the one thing is I just want to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying that you heard Lana in an interview referring to something similar, and that's probably why this is in there.
Yeah, well, it wasn't an interview. It was a speech in 2014, I think. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, she was doing a speech for this organization, and I don't know a lot about it, so don't quote me. Don't beat me up. It had to do something with transgenders, like a committee or a foundation or something. And she came out and she gave this wonderful speech. But one thing that stuck out to me is that she was able to say the thing that motivates her in the morning is the beautiful blue eyes that she wakes up to. And to me, that she just said, hey, I get somebody who sees me as me, right? Transgender is her wife. But that's the thing that's so special to me, is because somebody actually sees me for who I am. So it's in the show too, right? So that all these experiences that they have collectively together, really that message gets to spread out into the show. And I would agree wholeheartedly. It's really awesome when you are on the same page with somebody. You're on the same wavelength for a very long time. Even before I met you, Sheila, I've had people to come in and out of my life, but a lot of people just weren't talking my language, right? And then I met you, and you understood me. So that was a big deal, because you got to see me and we could have a conversation how I have conversations. So that was very special to me, because everybody else thought I was probably crazy and didn't really know where I was coming from. They're like, this guy learned how to talk on Pluto. I don't understand his concepts very well, or they don't make very much sense, and here we are.
I speak Pluto.
Plutonian?
And you know what? Just so you said that, like, Lana's life is seeping into to the show, and then we see the show and Lana's life seeping into the fans' life, or to our lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And not connecting it to this show or to anything about it. 4:30 last night, I just woke up and I was laying in bed. And all of a sudden, I just got this huge wave of gratitude for you, because you see me. And I know that, but the feeling that welled up in me, it was like looking into those beautiful blue eyes, that she's experiencing. It's like, wow, to be seen,
Mm-hmm. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I think that it's, this is not a big line in the plot, but I think that that's why there is such a movement of people whose lives are being transformed because of Sense8, because we're feeling seen, because we see ourselves in this show. And in order for ourselves to be in this show, and in all different ways, because what I see, when I saw it, I'm like, oh yeah, they're speaking my language. I see them working so hard to tell these truths and find the words and find the art. That's what I saw. Somebody else may be seeing, like, Nomi's plot or Capheus's, or this line. And I think that so many people are feeling seen by Sense8 for very different reasons, and yet that's all we want. And that's why the family, is that what Martin said? Family, or the world cluster is experiencing. It's like, I don't know, it's like if you go, and I'm sure people have it from different religions or country. Like if you're in another country and you see someone from your own country, even if they're from California and you're from New York, or if they're from Montana and you're from New York, which is really more of a difference, but you're going to be like, oh man, you're from the same country. There's like a familiarity when you see it. Yeah. Or like, an alumni. Like I attended, like if you're in a 12-step program, so like an Al-Anon or an AA, no matter
where, or
a consciously awesome, yeah. No matter where you are in the world, you can go into one of those groups, and there's a baseline that you feel like at least that aspect of your life will be seen. And I think that's what people feel with Sense8.
And as we're talking and I'm just feeling out what it means to be seen a little bit more, what I mean by that is to be seen, not manipulated, right? So it's the difference of stopping and smelling and appreciating a flower versus stopping and picking a flower.
Right.
Right. So to be seen just lets you be you without being manipulated. Right. And that's the great thing about Sense8 is because it gives people permission to be themselves, because there really isn't this box that we all fit into. You know, there's not, everybody's so unique in their own different way. And I talked about being manipulated by other people and how you feel like you need to fulfill their obligations of you. That's not being seen. You know what I mean? You're just like, I want to make you proud, or I want to be whatever fill in the blank this is, and you do what that needs to be done, but that doesn't mean that's you as a person or your essence. And Sense8 cracks that wide open and says, just be you. It's okay. There's a lot of people out there with your struggles. Everybody's, there's people out there like you. You can be seen by people in society because you're not alone. So I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think there's a deeper level to being seen than language or anything else.
Right. Well, think about this. Jealous doesn't go after. He doesn't sacrifice himself for it. He stays with the bus. Mm-hmm. Even before when...
because he trusts that Van Damme always comes
right.
back.
He has a level of trust in Capheus. Yeah. Even back when he said, out of loyalty, he was going to go with Capheus the first time when he was going to fight. And Capheus says, no, you have a family. And he listens and he goes. So those subtleties show a highly conscious relationship that we don't see always.
Yeah.
In codependency.
Mm-hmm. It's a big deal.
Those are big deals.
Yeah.
All right. We got like two more topics to get to, Zac.
All right.
So let's dive into Kala.
Oh, all right, Kala.
She doesn't have a lot of scenes, but we've got some pretty powerful lines in hers too.
Yep, and it's more thematic, very thematic, I think, across the board, everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, it kind of is a continuation of some of the other conversation we've had. We first see Kala when they're negotiating her wedding ceremony. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who those two people are.
Some consultants or priests, consultants, I don't know. Wedding singers, who knows? Some wedding planners.
Some sleazy. They're not the priests because they're doing the business for the priests.
Right.
I don't know, they remind me of a role and I don't know what it is.
And they didn't want to talk about money because it was going to be really expensive.
But they were totally there to do the money. Like it was like very strange. It was funny, but it's like what you take away will charge you more. So we're going to keep you there for 6 hours because you want to exchange rings, which is pretty ridiculous because an actual wedding ceremony, and I've officiated them, a modern Christian type exchange of rings takes 10 to 15 minutes, right? So because he wants rings, which also I wasn't really trusting him with why he wanted a wedding ring on his finger. And now I'm saying it right now. I don't know what Korea is like, but I know that people sometimes put wedding rings on when they work in Japan, because if you don't have a wedding ring on, I've heard, this is just me hearing, of businessmen who wear wedding rings when they're in certain cultures, that if you're not married, then they won't do business with you.
Oh.
So I just felt it was very fishy about him. I just want this wedding ring.
I thought we just had a stage 5 clinger. This guy, he's very clingy to her.
He is clingy, but I think he's way more manipulative than clingy. So
he's top of the food chain on a pharmaceutical company who's doing bad things. He's not stupid.
We don't know he's doing bad things.
Oh,
yet.
oops.
Well, actually, we do in this episode.
Yeah.
We do in this episode.
We do. He's got
'cause
a
at the
wanted
temple-
poster.
Yeah. So we got that going on, and they're basically like, holding him hostage to have this wedding, and it's going to cost too much. And then their joke is like, how much to not have the ceremony at all? And they go, you can't afford it. But then again, like, is this kind of mafia stuff? Like, is she going to be let out? We don't know. Like, they're not mafia, but they're like manipulative. Can she get out of this if she wants to?
Mm-hmm.
Because they could do things.
The priesthood. Robbing your coffers for time.
But then the other important thing is that then she goes to the temple to pray to Ganesh, and some of the people there,
some disciples or people praying, people
right,
that pray there every day.
Pray there. They probably are some form of leader or teachers or elders that are looked up to, because they were sitting on like a pedestal type thing with flowers and stuff around. Like they were sitting.
Oh, I didn't pay attention. I thought I saw some dude sitting on a bench.
Oh, maybe
passing out papers, some propaganda.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he just happened to be behind. But anyway, he's sitting there. And they've got pictures of her fiance and his dad, and these are the bad people now, and she doesn't know that. She's kind of stunned, and we don't really get her reaction that well.
Yeah, he says they're trying to destroy our India and turn it into America. They use their evil drug money to buy off politicians. So it's interesting too. Okay, so we'll keep going. We'll just leave it there. So, one of them is the head of the pharmaceutical company, and the other one is a politician. I just made that connection when we watched it this time. I'm like, oh, they can work together even though they're in different industries. So I was just curious if they really are in cahoots, like his father and son, if they're kind of doing some dirty work together.
Right, and I think that's a family industry too. So he came up through the pharmaceutical. The father probably came up and he's moved into politics.
And there's nowhere in the story that I can remember that actually indicates that from everything that's been filmed, but there hasn't been time to elaborate on that completely yet either. So it was curious. I was curious to see if they were actually working together. It was just the part of the next part.
Yeah, I think that they're working together. I'm pretty sure that there's that knowing going on there, so this line really got to me, because then this person so now we've got them as like the bad guy, now we've got them like as so now they're setting up her fiance and future father-in-law as the bad guy, and she's got conflict in her head, right? Because, well, I think she's conflicted anyway, and she's not feeling good about him, even though she doesn't have this information. But everybody's telling her that he's the good person, and he's treating her well. So this whole time, she's kind of like, well, I should love him. But her intuition is telling her it's not cool. But everybody around her says it's good. And so she's been trying to override her intuition anyway. But so she's seeing layers of this and trying to make sense of it, and in disbelief that there's these, posters of them up there, and that she's hearing this information about them.
Well, she got some more conflict too, right? Because her culture, like her family culture, is telling her to get married. Her religious culture is telling her this is a bad person, right? And then she has her own intuition saying, I don't love him. I don't want to marry him. So I think there's a lot of conflict building up within her, because religion is very important to most people who are religious, right? It's usually the top thing on the chart, and then you have your family. But she's got to kind of balance all of these things out. And so I can see where she's getting a little confused.
Well, and her family are making decisions based on their religion, because they're traditionalists in the same time. But she's the only one we see, and I'm not saying because her family seems very good in their own way, but she's the one that keeps going to the temple, and she's got her own even within the religion and the culture and the family. There's something inside of her that is different than the others.
Mm-hmm.
which is a theme here, right? We all have felt different, right?
Yeah.
And all of the characters are different than the ones around them. They're not fitting in to their families, their culture, their religions in the way that the others around them seem to be able to.
I wonder if this is why so many people are finding each other through this show across the internet.
I think maybe. So the line that really triggered me, so we've got these religious figures saying this, and they're trying to protect their religion. I mean, let's really call it out. No matter what religion it is, they want their traditions to be upheld, and they want the freedom to worship the way they worship. But then he says, we pray to Ganesh to destroy our enemy before the enemy destroys us, or they destroy us. And so she's there, and religions do this. Like, it's not cool.
Not cool, religion. Stop it.
It's not cool to pray. Like, think about that. If there is a God.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, is most of our religious thought is based in separation theology, not oneness. Not all of them.
It messes things up.
A lot of it is based in you're separate from God. That's the root of most, and you're trying to get commune with God or be part of it. The root isn't, hey, you're part of all that is. Right. There's a big difference, and so that's the root belief system that's causing all of these problems, right? Because if you're separate from God, that means you're separate from your fellow human beings. That means you're separate from nature. That means you're separate from your family members. So it's the root of this issue. Separation theology is not having a good effect on humanity.
Exactly, and it comes in all different forms, and that's the they versus we. And if we can tell a story that gives us an enemy, even if we're not going to pick up a rifle, but we're going to pray that the person is destroyed, like, it would be one thing to, in my perception of this, it's one thing to pray or intend or invoke a desire or claim the want for a behavior to be destroyed, for someone to see things differently, for a pattern of energy to change. But to make someone an enemy and then pray for them to be destroyed and then to talk it out without knowing who you're talking to, it just shows the layers. And there's only one way out in my mind. And again, we have to think beyond the human. Because if you really have a faith, then nobody can be a threat to it. It's not the exterior. Nobody can take that away from you. And most wars are about this, that we could take this away, that we couldn't practice. That this person, when we look at them, they're worshiping idols and we're not, when they're doing the exact same thing with different plastic figurines.
Or golden ones or whatever.
So it's just, that line is really powerful and heartbreaking to me. I think
it's sad.
It's sad, and I just...
Us versus them they're very, very strong strings to be pulled.
So Zac, you asked me earlier, what's the answer? Because this is something that we've talked about, I get triggered by. And when I feel a heaviness and a sadness in my heart when I see the human experience of this separation and mentality. And, we've talked about governments and we've talked about religions and countries and mental health issues on the train today, like all of these things. And what is the way out if we're not going to institutionalize and forget about the human and forget that every human is unique within itself and part of the reflection of oneness? Then how do we solve this? And for me, the only way is to solve it by remembering that, and by each individual learning to look beyond the human experience. When it comes to Sun, looking beyond what her mom said as a human and seeing something bigger, a bigger perspective than my mother said this 30 years ago in her fear. So to me, learning to see souls and see human experience and to separate that, and that lack of integration in humans is something that's very hard. And for me, one of the hard things was that I do see souls. That's that, whatever you want to call soul. I see what is beyond the physical. I have empathy. I understand people naturally and see their full potential. For years and years, I felt like I got hit by that. And I see these characters getting hit by that because I would ignore the human behaviors that didn't match the full potential that I saw in them. So there's two things here that I would say for my answer. One is it comes as individuals, and until we wake up as individuals and we begin to see beyond the humanness, until all individuals start to learn, or the tipping point when the majority of individuals can see beyond the physical limitations, that is key and will transform things, and we can move beyond these old storylines. But the other piece is that when we learn to see that and the physical and base our decisions on both. So the huge turning point for me was when I stopped ignoring the behaviors of people and the feelings that didn't align with the soul that I saw, and I began to acknowledge that, yes, I can see this soul, and I also see the behaviors that are happening that aren't congruent with that soul that I'm seeing. The behaviors I don't like, and I don't choose, even though I know that that is an expression of convoluted love, I don't choose to have that expression in my life, and therefore I'm going to base my decisions on where I place my attention, both on the soul that I see and the behaviors. And so it's the actions, it's the behaviors, not the people that we condemn.
Mm-hmm.
Or not even condemn, they're just behaviors. Condemn is too big of a word. Just decide not to put our attention on, not to be influenced by.
Yeah, condemnation is not a fun practice. It's not good. It's not very healthy.
I'd rather, no condemning of anything, but separate the behaviors from the soul.
Yeah, so there was one thing in there that you said that I want to ask about. You said the lack of human integration. Can you expand on that just for a moment? What does that mean, Sheila? So if you look at someone, if you're empathic or you feel a sense of, you're able to, so Capheus sees the good in everything, right? So if he didn't look at everything and he just looked at people's souls and not the behavior, then our souls are perfect, right? There is an essence of us that is part of all that is, oneness, God, creator, that is perfect. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to heal. And that is it within every single one of us. It can't not be, because all that is all that is. But at the same time, as human beings, we are not always aware of that. We aren't always connected to it. We aren't always conscious of it. So we can make those decisions based in fear, and there isn't an integration to the bigger picture. And if in that lack of integration means we don't see beyond the little situation, we're in survival mode usually, basically, whether we're really just trying to survive for food or we just have a perception of having to survive. But in order to live consciously and to evolve, as Felix says we have to be able to see every aspect of ourselves and other people. We have to see them as the limited human, and that is only a tiny piece of their higher self, their crystalline or ascended self, their vibrant earth self, their alpha and omega self, and all that is. Thanks for explaining integration.
So simple.
Yeah, it's easy, super easy, no problem. Over the last couple of years, I've just learned that it's okay to love people from a distance.
Yeah, sometimes the most loving thing to do is to not place your attention on someone. And when you're being manipulated, affected by their behaviors, then the only loving thing to do is to step away and turn your attention to a place where you can you're free to just look at their soul, because it's not affecting you on a daily basis.
All right, let's talk about Jonas. This is pretty cool. I think Will, like I said earlier, I really, after watching this particular episode and looking back, I was like, man, Will, he's getting prepped. He's going to be the quarterback, if you will, for a poor analogy. But he's getting a lot of information that the other ones are not about being a sensate. And I think it's for a very specific reason, because he has a really big role to play that the other characters don't have to play later in the show. So very interesting.
Yeah, so we noticed that Nomi and Will are the only one interacting with Jonas and getting this and really getting information.
Well, Nomi only got 3 seconds with Jonas.
Right, because she is she's under fear and drugs, so he really can't access her because she can't tell that it's him. But so yes, Will is the one. So was he just physically in the United States and that's why, or was he in the United States because Will was the key player? We've got Chicago being where Angelica had gone.
I'm just now thinking of something as we're talking about this. So when Jonas was in Nomi's hospital room, he was actually in San Francisco. Jonas then went to Chicago physically.
Right.
So is there a limit of how far they can visit each other? Does that make sense? So it's not like, I don't know, maybe not, because later in the show. Okay. Yeah, there's a longer distance. Okay. I just had to talk that out, because I was like, oh, why didn't he go back to Nomi or whatever? Or why isn't he talking to anybody else? I was like, is it because of his physical location? But
I can see.
I think that gets debunked in season 2.
Sort of, except if we're translating it into human experience, I can see where, at least in the beginning, it could have been helpful to Nomi and Will. And the reason I'm saying that is when my twin flame was alive and we lived within the same general community, and sometimes he would go to Canada, and when he got further away from me, even if we hadn't been near each other, like we weren't near each other physically or talking every day in the physical world all the time, but when he left, I remember one time just driving and thinking, it's so quiet. It was like when he was further away, all the conversation that I heard in the head that I had gotten so used to, in its absence, it was like a breather sometimes. So I can see in a human, like in the human reflection of this, that there could be an element that in the beginning that would be helpful. Yes, it gets debunked. It's not necessary, but I definitely remember times going, my brain is so quiet. And then as soon as
must
he'd
be like
back.
winter.
Yeah. So, but Jonas has some really good lines here again, and teaches Will a lot of, I want to say a lot of the lore, because I think that it's so important to remember that we as humans, we like to make sense of everything. And I'm one of those. When we were working on the movie or the novel, I have to go down every loophole. Like, that's one of my specialties.
And we also like to romanticize about everything at the same time. So I'm just going to throw that in there and let you finish, because it'll come back. Trust me.
Okay, because I don't know what you're saying.
It's okay. No, just romanticizing things like war or heroes or a time period, or like samurai, for example. There's different, or the Knights of the Round Table. Like, we make them sound very romantic, and it wasn't a romantic period, or they didn't do romantic things. They're idealized. So, having that said, we're talking about lore of the show and how there's a romantic idea behind the lore that we can get attached to versus logically stepping this out and see how it plays out in real life.
Right. So like that's what I'm thinking. Like we as sensates that are being ignited by this show, and as people are waking up and feeling like understood, and as we're listening to this, and there's such brilliance. And one of the things that Zac said at the end of this show, that watching it this time, he said, "It is clear that this has been divinely created." And so it is so obvious. And I'm not saying this is the only show, because
there's a lot
creativity is definitely part of creation energy. That's all it is, flowing. So a lot of our art is divinely orchestrated. And this is no exception. But I think it's so important that we don't limit ourselves and reduce the message of this. And you're going to hear me say this over and over because it's important. We can't reduce the message of it. We have to remember that some of these structures that are being put in here have everything to do with the way you have to write to tell a story in human form and in this medium. So they get into, you can do this with this group, with your cluster, and this, So yeah, this is cool. It's part of the dynamics to tell the story, but don't cling to that when you translate it into your real life, is what I would say.
Don't romanticize it.
Yeah, I get that now. Get you now, Zac.
Excellent. I told you it'd come back.
All right, so in this scene, Will's being the helper. He helps Sun out at one point when she's going after her brother, and someone comes up behind her with a gun, because he seems to be the gun one. She does the non-weaponry. He does the weaponry. Yeah. But then, so he's gone. He goes into the federal building or federal
prison or something
to try to talk to Jonas. And when the guy comes up, because he's linked into Sun at that moment, he ends up speaking in Korean. And then the guy's like, "Oh, I learned it in karate."
Yeah, Hapkido. He's like, "I did Hapkido for 13 years, and my sensei had the filthiest mouth or whatever for so long."
Yeah, because he just said some stupid little line. Yeah. Like, didn't make much sense. So, anyway, so he's there. He doesn't get to see Jonas in person, but again, there you are with a proximity. He's in the building, and that links him back up. They then continue to see each other, but there's something about that. So I would say it's when we're thinking like that, right? Like, because until you learn to think bigger, there's just opening up to this. We think in small proximity.
Learn to allow bigger.
Right. Until you learn to allow bigger. But think about that. Like I've always said, so the way it translates into the world, the internet and Twitter, social media, Skype, Hangouts, all of these things have helped us expand our worldview. I mean, only a generation ago, you basically knew the people in your neighborhood, couple generations ago. But I was talking to my in-laws, and they were talking about when they got married, or when she was younger. So they're in their 70s, and when she was younger...
Just out of college, yeah? Or around there?
Well, when she was younger, they moved in their teenage years, and they moved like what was like a 15-minute drive away, and she never saw her friends again. And then when she got married and came to Syracuse from Little Falls, which is about a 45-minute drive, because we were talking about it because, their granddaughter is now in LA, and it seemed so far. And he was saying... That's how far it was for your family when we moved, 45 minutes away. It's not far anymore. Right, so So I think that what I mean is that when you think like that, like he thought he had to go talk to Jonas, and so he had to get there, and it's about helping to change our mindset, and I think the internet has done an incredible job with that too.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but anyway, so he's there. He can't get into him, and then Jonas shows up and they touch hands, and he says, I feel you here. I can feel you. And Jonas says, I'm in solitary confinement. And then he says, Angelica called it visiting.
Which is different from listening, right? Or
Sharing.
Yeah.
Sharing. So members of clusters do it instinctively. So it's not that you can't visit. So this is the lore. So he's learning the lore, and this is important as we learn the story. So, but it also is why the eyes, because the eyes are the portal to the soul. Just a tangent. There were years where people would tell me that they were afraid of my website because of my eyes. I think I'm pretty friendly, but and so I'd be like, why? Like, I'm afraid of you because of your eyes.
Because you see dead people. Oh.
But they said, they would say to me, because I'd ask them why, and they said, because it seemed like you could look into the souls and know things about me that I don't want to know. It's like, oh yeah, I can.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's what I do for a living.
But anyway, so the eye thing is there, but so he's setting up some of the boundaries and the rules of what's going to happen. So we know there's more than one cluster. Clusters can share, is what he starts to talk about later. And sharing is like knowing the language. Because at one point, Will says, I can't speak Korean. And Jonas says, yes, you can. And when you get it, you will. So it's like he already can, but he just has to get it. He has to know what to do, and then he'll start using all those tools. And then he reminds him, he says, you are no longer just you. And again, it's not losing himself into this. He's more than himself.
Right, which is awesome.
Right? Yeah. So that's really important. And so Jonas again is teaching him. He's delineating between sharing, which is when you can actually share your skills and your knowledge, which they say is only in the cluster. I'd interpreted it's way easier with people you have a deeper soul connection with. And then outside of the cluster, in this storyline, you have to have been physically looking in each other's eyes before you can visit each other. In real life, that's not true. I've done a lot of visiting, and I know a lot of people who do visit.
So Jonah said visiting is not calling or texting. It's not something that you make happen. It's something that you let, or that you allow. So again, he's kind of just reinforcing, like, you don't make this thing happen. You let it happen. So
yeah, and that's really important. So that's after they're in the car. So Will goes out in the car after they've been disrupted, and Jonas gets taken away in a hazmat suit, right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty funny.
Yeah, so we know something's going on.
These dudes roll into this prison in hazmat suits and take out a man. Like, what? Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
So anyway, so Jonas is in the car, and he's been reminded about Nomi needing his help, and so he's trying to like will his way to that. Oh, did they pick Will for that reason? So he's trying to will his way to reconnect with Jonas. Jonas appears and he's like, I was trying to reach you. And then he says that. Like, it's not calling or texting, and it's that allowing. That is so important. But I also think it's interesting because, like I just said, I think that calling and texting is helping us learn how to move beyond. But also, I thought it was very interesting that none of them do switch over to calling and texting. Like, eventually, I think they have each other's phone numbers or something, but like, they could have just, hey, where are you? I mean, they have these conversations of like, where are you? And why not just be like, here's my phone number, or I'm this person in this town, look me up. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to switch over and actually talk to people, which, I mean, some of them come together, so they must do some of that. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Maybe they'll throw it in for fun later. Maybe it's just something like, we don't need to address that, and just for story reasons.
Well, we don't need to. I mean, I think this is a stronger communication, but so it goes back to my philosophy that texting and internet and all this has helped us to think bigger and to move towards the allowing of our telepathic communication, etc. But it can also, it's the gateway, but it could be the thing that holds us back if we don't go beyond it. So, I mean, if they had started texting and stuff, they probably wouldn't have continued to develop their communication.
Yeah, and that's a pretty important deal.
Yeah.
So he just gets out of the prison. They take Jonas away, and now Will's in a pinch. He knows he has to save Nomi, and Nomi's in a pinch because she's going to get surgery. And she actually says, "Help me." Like she is reaching out again to get help.
And I think, and this is after What's Going On soundtrack starts. It's in the middle of some of this, so we don't have much to say about that. I mean, it's just awesome. But Will's at the computer in the beginning of the song, and this is happening in the middle of the song. So Will's at the computer, and he's probably trying to find Nomi. It's exactly what we just talked about. I'm just realizing it. He's probably trying to find her at the computer because he's been instructed to go help this person to save their lives. And then the connection's made with all of them through the song, and they're all linking in together. And then he wakes up on the couch, so he follows it. He must leave the computer in the middle of this song. Not that they know that they're singing it all together, but he lays on the couch, and then she calls, "Help me." So he's kind of like in a sleep state almost. And then he goes over and uses his skills.
Yes, get out of jail free card. Breaking those handcuffs open.
Yeah.
It's pretty legit.
It was also nice that they changed handcuffs to metal and not those leather straps, because he might not have been as good.
Right, that would have been problematic.
That was convenient. And then Neitz gets Nomi out, which is just awesome. And then Will kind of comes to, and he's like, "That was so wild."
Right.
And that's the first time that any of them have really acknowledged the absolute coolness of helping each other. Right?
Yeah, what an experience. Hey, I just jumped in somebody else's body, used my skills to escape a hospital. Like that, there's some adrenaline going on in there,
right?
On top of supra consciousness. It'd be a big deal, I imagine.
Yeah. So that's pretty awesome. And I mean, it's just epic, and it's all done within the What's Going On soundtrack, which has become, like I said, kind of iconic. It's kind of, it is Sense8 in so many ways.
It is.
And then we have the fan version of it. So it's just an incredible way that they present it. It's something that we as fans were able to hold on to. We've got the fan video of people coming around from around the world singing it and coming together, which actually sparked Martin for the documentary. So it's just it's so beautiful. And then the line, I mean, we said it in the beginning, but it deserves repeating, where Nomi says that she's been hearing this song, and then she's like, "That."
It's a perfect song for a lobotomy.
Yeah. So, and that's where they give credit.
Yeah, and then nobody's like, "What's going on?" Like she was having that question, like, "What is going on?" So
right.
It's just such a great song. So you couldn't have picked a better song for the show.
So Zac.
Yeah.
There was a little bit in episode 4 that was worth talking about.
There was a little bit, and I'm sure we could have kept going and gone deeper, but here we are, gonna wrap up the show. You can find out more about Sheila's and my work at consciouslyawesome.com. You can connect with us on Twitter. That's at live_sense8. You can email us at team@livesense8.com. You can support us on Patreon /livesense8. And thank you very much for listening to this episode.